Hello, everybody. This is Crimson Anonymous speaking, and I'm here to talk about autism. Yay! Now, as a quick disclaimer, I have some kind. I can't really speak for everybody on the spectrum, obviously, and I also have ADHD. So I won't be exactly as you might expect, but we'll get into that later. Until then, allow me to yap about my experience with having autism, basically. For me, I personally am a pretty high function autism person, or at least I believe that's the correct wording. And basically, what that means is I'm able to do most, if not every task, with little to no help from others. The only exceptions I can think of off the top of my head are. Well, actually, I can't think of any. I'll get back to you on that. Conversations. Yay! Who honestly can say much of anything about them? I am usually pretty good at talking about things. When I'm interested in a topic, I can talk for hours. But conversely, if I don't really know what they're talking about, or if they're repeating the same thing over and over like I can't hear them, I'll either get bored or start ignoring them because I already got the point, but I'm not mean enough to just say, please move on. So most of the time, I am kind of tone deaf in the way that I can't always tell how my words come across because I just either say the first thing that comes into my head or something that sounds good to me. I don't know for sure how to explain it. All I know is that sometimes my wording will be taken the wrong way. The only person who's actually pointed this out to me is my mom because I think she's neurotypical. So she doesn't always get what I'm trying to say. So that's something. And I am not always trying to be mean. When I am, it will come across that way because I mean it. But it's a problem. Not that I have any way to fix it. I have tried going through my sentences again, like another time in my head, but sometimes it's just the only way I can think to say it. Okay, noise. For me personally, I always go around wearing a pair of Bluetooth headphones for like 3 different reasons. One of which is because having them on makes me feel comfortable, even if they're not currently like in use, like I'm not actively listening to anything. Having them on makes me more comfortable in whatever situation I'm in because it's like a protective layer. I imagine the only thing I could compare it to is like when you're about to go to sleep and you're it's like a good blanket basically. And it bonuses as a way to listen to music easily if I want to. So there's that. I'm also sensitive to noise, but not in the way where I would like actively jump if a loud noise appeared. It's more like I'm sensitive toward specific sounds. Like, I can deal with repetitive noises because as long as I know what they are, like a fire alarm or the fry hopper at work or something like that, as long as I know why that noise is happening and I know how to make it stop, I'll be fine. The only exception to this where I can't deal with a sound at all is what's it called? Styrofoam. the sound that styrofoam makes when it rubs against itself. I hate that noise. So there's that. Okay, so if you've ever watched a majority of TV shows, you've probably seen the kind of autism stereotype that I'm about to discuss. You know the one. Like, the always super smart, pulling nonsense out of their ass. And ironically enough, I fit that stereotype pretty well. What I mean by that is I'm pretty smart on paper. Like, I never really got below a C, even when I really wasn't trying. And when I was younger, I got put into basically it was like a special needs class, question mark. But I don't actually know what it was called, but it was this weird thing where instead of doing history lessons, they'd take us to this other hall and we got to make stuff. And I don't know, it's been a while, so I hardly remember much of it, but it was a thing that happened. In addition to that, other than like on paper, I am not that smart in practice. I'm pretty good at doing math in my head, but that does not mean I can solve any equation without paper. I'm not that smart. I'm also not that good at remembering anything. If I don't like the subject, I will just forget. Like, I could name at least 8 anime off the top of my head and list at least 4 characters from each of them. Couldn't tell you for the life of me if I learned anything in history class. But, it's like that. I believe my special interests have kind of gone back and forth over the time. Like, there's been at least one that always stays firmly in place ever since I learned it was a thing, and the other one kind of swaps out to whatever's relevant. Like, I'll get into a new anime every now and then, but a couple of them stay very close to my brain. That and the fact that I continue to be obsessed with vampires, even if I'm old now. By which I mean, y'all remember what cable used to look like? I remember watching cable TV at my babysitter's house when I was, I don't even know how old. And the only reason I remember it was because it was random cable TV and playing with empty pill bottles, and I'm not even kidding about that. I get into more of that story later. It was wild. But that said, I think that's probably everything I have to say about the stereotypes, I think. And this last bit might not necessarily be related to my autism, but it's still a thing that I do that I'm not sure if it's normal or not. So I'm just gonna list it anyway. And that specific thing is the way that I recognize the connotation of words. Like, I have never in my life called my mom ma'am without her having to prompt me to do so. And that's for 2 different reasons, at least for her specifically. One is because she's not old enough to be called that. It makes me feel like I'm calling her old, and that's not good. And the only time I would do it, I would call her ma'am, like, without prompting, is if she seemed angry, because I know that's a way to get her to be slightly less angry. And the other reason I don't tend to use it is because it's just not how I was taught, really. Like, most of my life, she's been totally fine with me just calling her mom. So I, no idea. And the only other person who I use honorifics for are specific people at my work and my little brother. I unironically call him, little sir or little man or something like that. And the reason in that case, I do it like in a semi. I don't actually know the connotation it's supposed to have. I don't even think about it that much. I just call him that because he's just a little guy. So I don't know how that would be interpreted. I don't usually go around calling anybody, ma'am or madam, because for the same reasons I don't say that to my mom. It makes me feel like I would be calling them old. So if I don't know somebody's name, I'll just call them Miss or Mr. Not to be confused with Mr. the teacher title. Because I use Mr. the teacher title for my male bosses, and Miss the teacher title for my female bosses. And the only reason I do that is because it's like a authority thing. Like, I respect my mom, but I'm not gonna call her Miss because I know her way too personally for that. So that's that. I will never use those terms for somebody I know but don't like. Like, I'll use any other term. Another strange thing that I do is I love to hoard things. And this is probably not just a me thing. You know, my room is absolute chaos because I love to hoard things. Be it old sketchbooks or papers from like 9th grade, which was, how many years ago? I don't even know at this point. And then there's a bunch of random items that don't work anymore, but I keep for aesthetic purposes. Is that how you pronounce that? I'm just gonna go with it. Which is like a plasma globe thing that I will never be using again. And I have a vase, but I'm not gonna put flowers in it because they would die. I'm not very good at keeping flowers alive, or like anything else for that matter. So that's that. Aside from the strangeness in how I talk to other people, there is the thing that I do where sometimes I will, in my head, have to assign somebody a generic name. Like, because I'm terrible at remembering names, I go by faces, and I remember people based on exactly 1 or 2 events from the first couple moments I met them, and that determines how I feel about them for the entirety of the rest of our relationship. Which basically means that first impressions actually matter to me, yay! So, I think a good example of this is my coworkers. I only have my managers' names memorized because it's the same, like, 4 or 5 people every time. And, you know. So I'll remember my coworkers or random people I meet a lot based on, like, a couple of physical appearance attributes and then, like, 2 words to describe how they act towards me. So I will hold a grudge over somebody forever because they were mean to me once when I first met them. But, you know, I'll tolerate a whole lot more if the first time we met they were pretty okay, you know? But at some point I'll just go, yeah. I don't think I can say their names, so I'll pick one of my coworkers whose name I genuinely don't remember. It's this one random girl who usually worked, like, more early morning shift, and she was, like, she always had funky colored glasses, and I remember her based on her glasses and the fact that she never took her hair down, ever. And because of where I work, it's impossible to imagine my coworkers wearing anything that isn't gray because, ironically, Nick Ronalds has changed so that there is no fun allowed. So only the managers get to wear color. It's very sad, actually. Um, I'm sure I'll do a couple later episodes on my job at Nick Ronalds. So, there's that. And then there's the fact that sometimes instead of doing what makes sense to do, I will do the complete opposite. Like, for the longest time, when I get nervous, instead of actually acting nervous, I start laughing hysterically or being overly giggly or something like that because that's how I'm nervous. I rarely ever get angry, but when I do, it's pretty bad. And I can't remember many times I ever had like a full-on meltdown, and the only time that actually happened was either in a specifically bad situation or a couple times at work where I was new to the whole working thing, and all of the noise and the people and having to do 5 things at once kind of got to me, at least at first. I got better at it and I haven't had like a severe one in a while, which is pretty good, I'd say. Now, I believe that's all of my anecdotes. That's all of my random snippets about my own thoughts on my own autism and some examples of it. I think, yeah. With that said, this has been Crimson Anonymous, and thank you for watching. I will probably see you some other time when I'm less sleepy and can actually form sentences without having to go, every other word. Farewell.